for the opportunity to share a bissel divrei Torah in a makom that I've had the schus of hearing so many chashuva shiurim and divrei Torah on the Mar Asher and other gedolei HaRabbanim. Normally, the sequence should be Zok a bissel advar halacha l'chvay the loim de daf Yomi and a sugya in this week's sequence. And Nachdem, if there's a little time left, comes down apart divrei Agudah. I'm going to change the order tonight because I'm going to start with a few Mili Dezechroina on Marin Sarah Torah, the Gadol Hadar. Ich bin Yisroya Mas Zayin. I'm not in the same universe as Reb Chaim Kanievsky. In order to be mas from somebody, you have to live in the same Kadur Aretz, in the same galaxy. And I don't. Just for a couple of minutes, I'll tell you a few things that I heard in the course of the Meshech HaShiva. I think that l'chayra, since Agudah the Hilulia Speda is a sehr wichtige Zach, and it's Deicha Talmud Torah, as we know, in all the yeshivas this week. There were a Spedim l'chvayd the Shvasai HaTahira of Moran. So we're not going to be Deicha Talmud Torah, but we'll perhaps order it in such a way just to say a few words. L'zichroi. You all, no doubt, have read the voluminous amount of material that has come out this week. I'm sure many of you was zeicha, like a large percentage of Shomer Torah mitzvahs to have met Reb Chaim and Reb Hashbam, and if not, you certainly have heard numerous what they call stories and uvdais about Reb Chaim's incredible Malach HaChaim and all the things that he was able to do. But I want to make sure, and I told this to Shlomo Lekhe today, that it's very important that we be careful that when we hear all these things, that we understand two things. We understand the methodology of where they came from, how they came, and where they came from. What do I mean? I'll tell you a bewusste Meise mit dem Goin. The Goin asked the Maggid to be Mochiachim. The Minigan Litte Gewen, as a Gewen Mochichim. The Chashman people would ask people to give them Divrei Techachah. The Goin, as his Yodua, never opened a window his entire adult life. He learned in a room that was sealed shut at the Oyer Haner day and night. He didn't want any distraction from the shuk to come into the room. And that's what we learned 18 hours a day. Slept 2-3 hours with Meis Leis, as Kiyodua. So the Maggid starts shuffling uncomfortably. I get Mechir Zayin the Rebbe, not only the Rebbe, the Goin, the Vilna Goin. So he comes up, what is he going to say? He comes up and says, the Rebbe, he says, "Ich dachte, Goin Vilna, but you said all day closed up in your room. That's not such a big nisayon. Go out to the street. Be marbetz Torah la'adarim, but list that the guy didn't really have. He had no moisid, and he didn't even have real talmidim. He had Shomer Lekhe. He had unser Rebbe, the Baal Nefesh HaChaim. But they weren't considered to be Talmidim in the classical sense of the word of Talmidim. So he said, go out, be Marbetz Torah, Berabim, Arais and Gas, and then we'll see if you're taka the same Vilna Goin. He then looked at him and he said, very good, aber ich bin nicht kein Kunstmacher. Ich bin nicht kein Kunstmacher, which translated English means, I don't do. Do we have a good word for this?
Circus tricks.
That's a little bit too thing. I said, I don't do tricks. I'm not a magician. I don't do tricks. What's the chat in this? So, I heard from Lake Rashiva from Kiel. He explained that what the guy was trying to say was that my job, I have a tafkid in life in this world, and that's to learn Torah all the time. Not only of them steht the Welt in the door of the Goin, We're all here today learning Torah and the nusach that we learn because of the goyim. Because of the goyim. My job is to learn. What happens to that is not my achrayis. This is the Rabbi Shalom's achrayis. And in fact, the Rabbi Shalom took the goyim's Torah and he forced it out through the cracks in the goyim's house, so to speak, and it lit up the world for the next 200 plus years. That's what mean the hashpoi from the goyim. Imtim Salaymer. The same can be said about Marin Rabbeinu, Faizon Denomin, who passed the Shiva, but was Dinah Bespert, Shleishim, called Yud Beis Chaydish. Marin Hadoin Rabbeinu, Yosef Chaim Ben, Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael. Is the Shaila is, how was Reb Chaim's Hashpah in learning as powerful as it was? He had no yeshiva. Imtim Salaymer had no talmidim. Ad Kedei Kach, Reb Chaim never had a job his entire life. Not one job in Torah. He wasn't a Rebbe. He wasn't a Rav. We all used to call him the Rav because what else were we supposed to call him? But he never had a shtel in his life because the Stipler, the Rav Kedushasai at Verstanden, they told him when he was a young man, Chaim, you have two choices. You can sit and learn, or you can do other things. Other things, Shetach and Torah. What was he going to become? And the two were steered to each other. And Reb Chaim was Makabel Atzmai at the age of 3 years old when he said Torah Tziva Moshe for 91 years. Lai Pasuk Girsa Mipume. His entire life was devoted to be within the Sefer Torah and to be a Sefer Torah Chai. When Memela were all his Talmidim, because Rabbi Shalom took the Torah that Reb Chaim had inherent in him and forced it out to the entire world. Just like we all, to some respects, learn from the schus of the Torah of the Goyim, so too in this Torah that we was like to live in, we all have, our learning is somehow a hashpah of Reb Chaim's learning, because the Rebbe Shalom took the learning that he had, Makodesh Benima, without any stella. We was able to some of his farm, but his farm are hard learning because his farm required you to be mater, because you have to know a lot of marmakaimis, and you have to. It's not the heintige quote unquote yeshivish the Torah, daf harvin of them the way Reb Chaim did, but his hashpah licked in us because he was the klikibul of Torah in the entire Dar. And therefore, when all these stories come out, and the stories are legion, you all know all the stories. The story with the photographer, which is more to his Ishiyosei Agudah, but it also goes to how Reb Chaim's brain worked, and I'll talk about that in a second. We all know all these stories, but it's very easy, especially for younger Talmid Chacham, Yeshiva Bachram, if you like, to fall into the trap of focusing on Reb Chaim's Meifsim. But Reb Chaim was not a kunstmacher. How did Reb Chaim mivatei, first of all these things? Everyone, including myself, has either personal stories or stories that you know from the people Klirishayim that it happened to. Everyone. Why? Because it was so many hundreds of them. So where do they come from? So you'll say, he was born with such a kaich. Nishtemesr. Kaich what he was born with, what he wasn't born with. I know he was born with a certain advantage over us in life because his name was Kanievsky. But on them, if not for the fact that he made choices. He made choices in his life starting at the age of 3 years old, and every single other inflection point in his life, he made choices to stay the Sefer Torah Chai and to vaxois into the Kli Kibbul of Torah for the entire Dair in a way which we have not seen since the pre-war Dairis. Perhaps since his uncle, the Chazon Ish, someone who knew Kol Torah Kula. Ba'amkus, B'Bekias. I mean, there's so many stories. I just heard just today something I never heard. That there's a Gemara Den of Saita which says, it's just one of literally 100,000 stories. The Mishnah in the state as Mishameis, Batla Nova. I don't remember which time it was. Rebbe, say, taking going that the word Anah is a reference to a Tana. There was a Tana whose name was Anah. So he once told this over to Mrs. Alman. Mrs. Alman, who was a pretty good computer, Kultur too, said, "There Shein of versteht nicht. In ganz Chazal, in ganz Shas, there is no Tana with the name Anah." Chaim was a young man who was present at this meeting. Chaim, on the way out, he turns to his Malav and he says, "Ein Platz in a Tosefta Echveis, one of Reb Chaim's typical Maramekaimis, where it quotes a Tana by the name of Anan, not with an ayin. Ayin is quite well known with an aleph nun nun. So the Mustafa doesn't give an M. So I tell you, Sefer when the Gedaf stein, I know understand that. No, okay, this is weiter a kunst. But where does this come from? So Reb Chaim himself, first of all, about all the incredible, what Klal Yisrael tends to think of as unbelievable ma'aser, Reb Chaim himself tells you where it comes from. Reb Chaim has a sefer which he put out called Erchis Yosher, and everybody knows Reb Chaim people used to come to them. I'm not going to spend time now because just learning, but with the most complicated medical questions, the most complicated questions that involved multi-level disciplines in psychology and all sorts of other things which you had to be able to have a background in. But Reb Chaim would give the answer, and the answer would be correct answer, and it would work out. And I'm not going into details, but where does this come from? There's a kunz. So Reb Chaim has a sefer in which one of the chapters is called Ruach HaKodesh. Reb Chaim goes through, don't have time to go through the whole thing now, it's about 3-4 pages, but he tells you as we should mace Nevi'im Achrayim Batal Nevuah, that's true, but Ruach HaKodesh in a certain form is still around, and he says in the following way, and I'll quote you several lines. Ubezer re'inu harba pa'amim eitzel hagdoilim, he says, Sigven Gedolim, that we get the same question. Yes, Inyan Shemin Hashamayim Nois Mepiv Ma'aloymar. The Shemayim, they're given to a person's piv, what to say. Va'af al pi she'ein yodea klal, shezeh Baruch HaKodesh. The person who's speaking doesn't even know it's Ruach HaKodesh. Rak noisen loy machshava loymar kach v'kach lefi das Torah shebiyadai. V'u mechaven la'emes. This is not a description of someone writing about Reb Chaim. This is Reb Chaim himself writing what this phenomenon was all about. And therefore sometimes you can get different answers to different people. And he said, V'zeh gam kein me'en nevuah ketana. K'may shekosav eser yoshim Hashem b'fi oisoi eshmoir lidaber. I personally heard from a Shteinman, one of the Nesias Reb Shlomo took to America. I heard him say that everything Reb Chaim says that comes out of his mouth is b'bchinas kodesh kadoshim, which means it's not necessarily him talking as a regular person. Okay, so you'll say, no, Reb Shalom gave him this gift as a genetic gift. There are some people who can run fast, who can jump fast. Reb Chaim was born with this gift, but that's not true. Chaim himself says, where does this come from? This comes from because this person because he is Das Torah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives him this incredible gift. And he says, very often, of course, it's dependent on the Das of the Shayel, how much you're maimin. The point of Baisai is that none of this fell into Reb Chaim B'Yerusha. It came from a lifetime, and it's striking because you have some stories when he was younger, but the stories when he was younger goes to his asmada, not to his mifsim. All the mifsim are from the last, I should say all, with exception to everything, but the vast majority of the mifsim are for the last 30 years. And Chaim and Durchaharvat Kol Torah Kula, scores and scores of times. So if anybody who was royu to this madrega, as he writes himself, Asher Yasem Hashem Befi Oisei Adaba, which comes from the Koyach HaTorah, it's Reb Chaim, and that's where it came from. And Zois V'Oid, I'll just be signed with this Ra'ayon. And I saw this myself. many, many times. I can't. The first time I was like to meet Reb Chaim was maybe 30 years ago. I can't even believe it till this day. It was a whole Indian. I can't go into it now. But I was like to sit with Reb Chaim with another person for over an hour and a quarter. Who could imagine such a thing now? But as time came on and it became the achroi and the address for all of Klal Yisrael, it got harder and harder. You all heard probably this week the fact, you heard what they said at the Levaya, that they went to Buha because it saved them 5 seconds a week, and therefore it aggregated into 10 minutes a year, and Reb Chaim 10 minutes a year was the same as 100 hours for all of us of learning. Shai. But you speak to Reb Chaim, and you could tell, and I felt this viscerally, even though I couldn't necessarily explicate it specifically. You could tell that he was talking to you perfectly. Haraya, people would come with the most complicated medical shilas. I know personally, like everybody else, I know personally a case of a person with a sick child who went there, a whole story with the 2-page, the medical options were so complicated, it took 2 pages just to summarize it. We told him to take it, write it down as shortly as possible. Hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of people who needed an oncologist came to Reb Chaim with complicated questions of what to do, life-threatening questions. And of course he would talk to you and he would answer. But at the same time, you can tell there was another part of Chaim that was somewhere else. Not that he was distracted. What's the pshat in this? When we got to Chaim Meiser, everybody knows, was able to write 2 letters, 3 letters at the same time. What's the pshat? Pshat is, Chaim Meiser had such an incredible brain that if it takes me X to write a letter, Reb Chaim, a letter on my low level, Chaim Meiser had 3x power of his brain, and he could divide his brain into 3 different slices, and therefore he could write 3 letters at the same time. But it was one brain. So Eden, and this is, I'm not sure exactly how it happens, of Eden who have 2 totally separate compartments in their brain. They can talk to you fully, and at the same time, their second brain is totally thinking and learning. And I heard this week in Lakewood, a friend of mine told me that he heard from Meir Rabbi Rav Schneier, that Rav Schneier told him that Rav Shach told Rav Schneier that he had such a brain. Shach had such a brain. He was able to talk to people, and at the same time, his second compartment, which was totally different, not that it was operating at the same time. Some people could do 2 things at the same time because they're balikisha. No, it was 2 different sections of his brain. I'm not talking from the physiological point of view. So I said, you can't trachten to learn it. Rav Schneier asked him, supposedly, wer noch in der gewinnen Azah Madrega? Rav Shach smiled, looks at him and says, Dein Tata, he says. And it's known, it's well known. People who remember Rav Aaron, which I don't, knew that Rav Aaron would come in, talk to a gvir, and I checked this today with someone who remembered Rav Aaron as a young man. Rav Aaron would come in and he would talk to a gvir, and there was something else going on. You couldn't quite put your finger on it, but it was obviously brilliant, as Rav Aaron always was. And what's the raya? And we walk out, people would hear him muttering to himself, "Oh, that's a pshat in the Rambam." The entire conversation, while he was talking to you, the second part of his brain was holding and learning. This is a unique thing. It's not gifted to a person, I don't think. Lefeni is daiti. It's not like you or Nilui. I'm not going to go into Chaim wasn't Nilui, not Nilui, ich weiß nicht. But it's something which requires incredible decisions to be miyageya and to devote yourself to Torah and only Torah your entire life with nothing else. Can you imagine a person who spoke on the telephone twice his entire life? In the 21st century? Twice his entire life? Once one of his children was sick and he did an operation here in America, so he had to call him. The second time because it was a benolach of everything that he had to settle twice his entire life. This is a Sefer Torah Chai. And because of Reb Chaim and his unique abilities, we are all here tonight. Because such a tzaddik is mashpia on the doyer, and everything that we learn, even though we had other chashav rabbeim, we are zeicher in the schus of Reb Chaim. Mi'itl and Tumor Asai, because there really is not any other tumor of Mimi was unique. I don't know if our lifetime we will see such a thing. Okay, Rabbi, so this week, I'm learning a bissel. This week was the Sugya in the beginning of the week of what is going to do. So, Tzaras Abbas, M'chalekes B'Shem Beis, and the Gemara comes to certain maskanas. There are three sets of machlekes, maybe four, that I want to talk to you about for the next few minutes. The Gemara starts off with the machlekes Riech and Rish Lakish. The Gemara brings the B'Shem Beis Shenechleku, al Tzaras Abbas, and the Gemara says, "What is going to do?" The Gemara quotes the Gemara in Megillah as Megillah is Nikras and Yud Aleph through Tezvav. You could count what is going to do. So there's a machlekes Riech and Rish Lakish. That's machlekes number one. It seems that they're chaylik whether there is such an isser of what is going to do it at all. What kind of isser of what is going to do be a deraisa rabbanan? This is a big diyun in the Rishonim and the Achrayim. But kipshutai, from the Riyah to the Gemara starts talking about drashais in the psukim, is mashma that it's a deraisa, which would make every license going to do a suffik deraisa. The Rambam is mashma kain. The lashon of the Rambam Perigid Beis V'Chavod Zara is Shenema Leis is going to do B'Chlal Hazara Zu, when he goes on to define what his Havana of Leis is going to do is. V'Katuv Leis is going to do Leisasa Agudah Agudais. Kipshutai, the Rambam seems to be understanding this Sugyos of Gemara. It's not an asmachta. Could learn the asmachta. Could be there's machlekes and mashmois darshan and asmachta too. But it seems to be that the riyata of the lesson of the Gemara is asmachta. Rav Moshe and Nigris Moshe Chelik Daled Shuvas Lamed Daled says kip shutoi. There's no question is that Leis is going to do a raisa. It's a very chomerdik yisur. We have to understand under what the applications are. It seems to be machlekes Riech and Rish Lakish. And the Gemara asks a kasha from Megillah, and the answer is Aminu Lacha Isura, Minhag Isura. The Gemara asks the kasha from the Minhagim of Asiyas Malacha and Erev Pesach. Malkum Shanagu, Malkum Shaloi Nagu. And the Gemara says, what's for a kasha? Thus, Kriyas HaMegillah, Shaloi Bizmana, is a Isser, Matarne, Shvals HaPosuk in the Megillah, Bizmanehem, whereas the Siyas Malacha is a minhaga. From the Pashut Lashon of the Gemara would be mashma. There's no isser of Leis is going to do on a minig. It's machlekes number one. Machlekes number two is a machlekes later in the Gemara. In the Gemara is maskana, how to shtelavek the gedarim of Leis is going to do. And the Gemara says two possibilities. One is that shtei batei dinim be'ir achas, who paskin echad beis Shammai, echad beis Hillel is not a problem, because two separate batei dinim is not an issue. And the second, this is a baya, when Rav's psak is named. So Muzay one bezdin that palag meirin kebeis Shammai and prag meirin kebeis Hillel. That's only the Israelites is going to. Adkan, the three machlekes are basically Megalin and Enos. So I want to raise with you a question, but again, to one specific issue of Leis is going to do, and that is Tefillin and Chalamoid. How did I come to this? Because before Petiras Rav Chaim, I was going to talk a little bit about the Rebbe von unserer Mörder Asra, Hagoyin, Argamada Levi Soloveitchik, whose first yard site was only a relatively short time ago. It was like in our publication to put out a extensive Sefer Zikaron on Rav David, and there is a diyun about Tefillin and Chalamoid. I'm going to tell you some of the mizukt, the briskerade on Tefillin and Chalamoid, and then I'm going to leave you with a shy little halacha about Tefillin and Chalamoid, which is Negela Dina. I'll start this way. In the Anhagais of a Gramad Halevi, it says that Rav David said the minig in Chutz La'aretz was to put on Tefillin and Chalamoid. As you all know, it's machlekes in the Paiskim. Maybe it's the machlekes in Minhagim, but it's certainly brought down in the Paiskim, starting with machlekes and Rishonim, as to whether or not we put on tefillin the Chalamayit or not. We don't put on Shabbos and Yontiv because it's an ice, and it would be a steer. It's also to put out tefillin on Shabbos and Yontiv, and Kolashon HaMechaber, that Kolashon HaMechaber, Lashon HaTorah, and Lashon HaMechaber. Chaylel Shamayit Yesh Mistapkim, Imuzman Tefillin Manichin Aisei B'lei Bracha, because according to the Torah, it's a suffix. The Shaila Daf Mishmak Nebracha Sag Brach L'Akol. However, Adoni Avi Arash was machmer, and he put on tefillin with a bracha. Brings on Chalamayit. We're talking about Chalamayit. Sorry, Yantiv is finished. Brings the Beis Yosef. That was the minik hameruvach throughout Sfarad because of the rush, until they were Megala Desire. They were Nizgala more or less in the same century. I'm not going to go into that now. Staten Beis Yosef, you all know, Achshav Nagel Kol B'nei Sfarad Shaloyan La'nichom B'chayil Hamayit Keneged the Psak of the Rush. Why is that? Because Shekasrab Shin Bei Chay, that's Osro Licham B'chayil Hamayit B'chein Kasav Meiri Daidi. Beis Yosef had a chash of an uncle named Rabbi Yitzchak Kairai, and B'kaira in the Zayr, in the Medrash Shir Hashirim, Medrash Hanelim of Shir Hashirim, even though Shebol Talmudi did on its line is Bayer Zendi Meferish, a Bevert Meyazayin Shteit Beis Yosef to be Chelik with Abshim Ben Yechai, and therefore in Sfarad they were noiheg not to put on tefillin. Comes along the Ramah in Lamed Aleph says V'yesh Aymer Shel Chayus Hamayit Chay B'Tefillin, the Rush. V'chei noigim b'chol Galilais Elu Lanicham B'Mayit Levarach Aleim Aber V'machnish Kam Bracha She'ein Mevarch Aleim B'Koil Rab. Kol Ram, basic Knesses. Why name of Archan Kol Ram? We'll see. Okay? The Shiur brings two important things. He says, Achaynu maskim now das hataz, that we make them, we put on tefillin for those who do minik Ashkenaz b'loi bracha, and he says you should make a Tanai. What's the Tanai? He says, maybe if I'm mechayev tefillin, I should put them on the mechayev l'shem mitzvah, and not I'm mechayev l'shem tachshir. This way I wouldn't do Al Taisif, and I wouldn't be going to neged the shittas of Matornish. This is the basic machlekes. As you all know, there are two other kitais in Klal Yisrael, in addition to minik Sfarad and the Beis Yosef who don't put on tefillin and Chalamayit, and that is Talmidei Hagra. The entire number of Talmidei Hagra in Europe were tiny. When they got to Eretz Yisrael, it was still, in today's day and age, they lived in one apartment building in Yerushalayim. It was a tiny, some in Tzfas, some in Yerushalayim, but it was a small group. Talmidei of the Baal Tanya also held that way. And therefore it came out that real followers of the Goyin, real followers in Chabad, they don't put on tefillin and Chalamayit. But everybody else, the Chayr, should put on tefillin and Chalamayit. Says Gramada Halevi, now when he became Bar Mitzvah in Brisk, he asked his father how to be Noyeg. Why? Because Reb Chaim and the Brisk Rav did not put on tefillin and Chalamayit. Why did they not put on tefillin? So you'll say, because they passed like the Goyin. No, not true. Reb Chaim and the Brisk Rav were much deeper, had much deeper reasons than that. And they had numerous rayas to the shittas of the Shreinim that you don't put on tefillin and Chalamayit. But it's a machlekes, chip's in the paiskim. So David asked his father, I'm becoming bar mitzvah and Chalamayit. What should I do? So he says, as typical of the Brisker Rav, certainly in his hanhaga with his children, he told him, learn the sugya and come back to me. He was 12 years old. Learn the sugya and come back to me and tell me what you think I should do. So he said, you went through the sugya, and Noha Kiminig Agiv, and he didn't put on tefillin. We bring here that his brother, Beryl, went to ask, he was a few years older than him, he went to ask some Chazalik, his father must have told him the same thing, learned the sugya. So I don't know, he wanted to hear what the Gedayla Paiskim says, so he went to ask some Chazalik, the Dayan and Brisk, what to do. And some Chazalik told him, what I do is, I put on tefillin without a bracha, like the norm of Allah and the Taz is, and I make this tonight. If it's Asr Chalamayit to put on tefillin, I'm wearing it the same tachshit, if just in case I'm going up against an Isser. Ad Kan, story number one. This is a little bit mufrach from the following situation. There's another shmua in Brisk that Reb Chaim told the Brisker Rav, who also his bar mitzvah was in Chalamayit from the Shana Rabbah. Reb Chaim told the Brisker Rav that since he's becoming bar mitzvah on Shana Rabbah, normally learn the Sugya. I'm sure he told him the same thing, because whatever Brisker Rav told Rav David, he got from his father. Learn the Sugya and come up with what I'm not telling you have to do like me, and not put on film Chalamayit. It's the Ramah, and every single person in Brisk put on film. They all pass like the Ramah, except for the Rav, except for Reb Chaim. So in order to get around that, you have to be able to have rayas that way. So he told him to go learn the Sugya. Okay, but since his bar mitzvah was on Shana Rabbah, allegedly he told him to put on film in one son as bar mitzvah in Shana Rabbah. Why? He should not start off. It should not be a possible kakafta delay monach film, starting off his chiyuv of tefillin, becoming a bar mitzvah on that day, starting off his chiyuv of tefillin, as I state wird gebringt in a sachplätzer, in a lot of places. I can give you all the various places that it said. One of them that was famous, probably the earliest Mekayr, was in the Briska Agudah, which came out probably 30, 40 years ago already. So when the Griz became bar mitzvah, it was Chalamayit and Shana Rabbah, Tuf Reish Samach, and Reb Chaim told him to be doiresh, to give his pshetel. This is what they did in that family. They didn't make a pshetel for you. Go make up your own pshetel when you're 12 years old. And he even told you what exactly that pshetel has to be. He told him to make up a pshetel on Hanachas Tefillin and Chalamayit. And the young Yitzchak Zev, they brought many rayas from the Rishonim not to put on tefillin and Chalamayit. Rav Moshe, his brother, heard that. Rav Moshe was a few years older than him. He had already started putting on tefillin. He stopped putting on tefillin. But Reb Chaim called him, and he called the Brisker Rav, and he said, because it's your first day of your bar mitzvah, you should put on tefillin. This is the legend that is brought in various places. Here, Shteit Geshibim, that is Talmidim, and maybe you heard this from him, Reb Shlomo, I don't know, asked him if this is true or not, and he says, I never heard this. And he says, V'haraya, I never heard it, that it's not, and it must not be true, because I was bar mitzvah on Chalamayit, the same as my father, Chalamayit Sugyos. And he didn't tell me that I have to put on tefillin once in my life. He told me to learn the Sugya, and whatever I come out with, that's what I come out with. Okay, Adkan, issue number one. Issue number two. They moved to Eretz Yisrael, and now the question became, what do you do in Eretz Yisrael? So there, they had no problem, because the Brisker Rav didn't put on tefillin Chutz La'aretz, so he had no problem of not putting on tefillin in Eretz Yisrael either. On Chalamayit. We're talking about Chalamayit. I'm sorry if I'm leaving any other impression on Chalamayit. So, however, there were other people who did put on tefillin in Chutz La'aretz. One of them was Bavlist, who was Rav Lezer de Finkel. So he came to the Brisker Rav to ask him what to do. He had been putting on tefillin all his life, Chalamayit. He was also saved B'derech Nes, and he came to America. He came to Eretz Yisrael, and he wants to know, what do I do now? So this is the story, and we'll talk about the Amitus Hadvarim. But the story was that the Brisker Rav told him the following: there's no din of anachas tefillin every single day. Mikra din, we're all mechuyev, and now we'll go back to every single day. We're all mechuyev to wear tefillin all the time. Why don't we wear tefillin all the time? Because we're not able to, because we don't have gufim nikiyim. He said, this is what I'm miyayitz to you. He says, you don't have to wear tefillin Chalamayit to be chayshish to the minik ha'makon. Because in addition to an issue of is going to do, there's also this Gemara Psachim, which talks about going mimakom shenogu aleph to makom shenogu beis, and the end of the Mishnah is al yishana adam pnei machlekes. So that is an issa d'Rabbanan. Even the Tim Salayim is going to do is an issa d'Oraisa. Al yishana adam pnei machlekes is an issa d'Rabbanan, and therefore l'chayra the minhag ha'makom in Eretz Yisrael was not to put on tefillin. Where did it come from? It came from either Sfardim. Why should Sfardim be considered to be the minhag ha'makom? So somehow after the 1800s, the early 1800s, when the Talmid of the Grand, Talmid of the Baltani came, they made an aggregation of the Sephardim, and whatever Ashkenazim were, and these were, I guess, a significant part of the Ashkenazim, certainly be'echus, and together it now became that in Gansa Yisrael, you don't put on tefillin until this became nitfas to the din of minig hamakom. So how that exactly that happens is tzarchiyun, but it happened. And therefore, so you can't wear tefillin in public. So the most you can do is you can wear b'tzina, and that's our some Zalman Paskins, other contemporary Paiskim more Paskin. And if you come from a makom, it's manichem tefillin, or you are maniach tefillin, you can wear tefillin only b'tzina without a bracha. Since most people don't make a bracha on Chol Hamoed, even if in the Chutz La'aretz, Zichar Nisht, if you're in Eretz Yisrael, make without a bracha, but only b'tzina, because otherwise, whether it's Leisis Gaidu or not, then you're getting into Yishana B'nei Machlekes, because you're changing or you're going up against the Minig HaMakom. What about the fact that he wanted to wear tefillin? What he wanted to wear tefillin? So the Rav told him there's no mitzvah to wear tefillin every day, supposedly. So what do? He said, how long do you wear tefillin every day? An hour? Maybe it's Elizabeth Finkel an hour and a half. That's how long it takes to daven in the yeshiva. Take this hour and a half, wear tefillin on the day after Yom Tov for an extra hour and a half, and that will make up the amount of time that you were missing on Chol Hamoed. Achirish Atzum. That brings this both in this kuntras and it's in Sefer and Chumash. There are pikpukim in this. First of all, l'chayr connected mefurish Rishonim. Gets a mission in Perigel Chazisay Atayra and the Ma'aser of Elisha Bal Knafayim, which talks about when you're mechuyev to be Ma'aser Nefesh or not. Gets the mission says mefurish that Shani Tefillin. Why was Ma'aser Nefesh on Tefillin? Because mitzvasei b'chol yoyim. Somebody told me this week recently that a Fersher Ben Yaina, which says that if you didn't put it on tefillin all year, you're mevatel 365, 350, whatever the number is, except for Shabbos and Yom Tov, mitzvahs asay. Fersher Ben Yaina connected this. So maybe the Brisker said in B'shitas the Rambam. Where did he see it in the B'shitas the Rambam? Because the Rambam doesn't say there's a mitzvah b'chol yoyim. The Rambam says mitzvah nicht tefillin. By the omission, the Rambam doesn't say it's a mitzvah nicht tefillin. This is l'chayr where the Brisker got it, and he must have, according to this story, he must have held it halacha, because this is what he told Eliezer Finkel, and it's brought in several places. It's also brought that this same svara b'shem Rav Shach, basically, it's a little dubious to me that Rav Shach would bring up this svara and tell it to Brisker Rav. He told it to Brisker Rav, and Brisker Rav says a good idea, and then he told it to Eliezer Finkel, Nish Mustaver. I don't think Rav Shach would be, would bring up a svara to this of such sweeping sharfkeit to the Brisker Rav. Most of the Brisker Rav told this to Rav Shach, and Rav Shach, as they say in yeshiva, hadled with him. Al Chaponim, and this nister from the fact that Rav Shach did put on tefillin betzina. I saw Rav Shach in Chol Hamoed, and he wasn't wearing tefillin, but he wasn't wearing tefillin in yeshiva. What he did betzina, I obviously don't know. But Mizak Dibra, Rabbi Zalman told him to wear tefillin in Chol Hamoed. Couldn't be Rabbi Zalman told him to wear tefillin in the yeshiva, because that would run into Al Yishana of Nebachlekes, if not Leisis Gaiden, and we'll end with that in a moment. But Mustafa Yimei did betzina in the house. Rav David himself asked kashas from a Chuvas Kriv Eger. There's a Chuvas of Chuvas Kriv Eger. If you only have enough money to buy a lulav and to buy tefillin and Chol Hamoed, so the halacha is that you buy the tefillin and you leave over the lulav, because lulav and Chol Hamoed is only drabbana. So I asked Rav David, why did the Kriv Eger just say, if this far is right, make buy the lulav, which is a mitzvah veris now, and you'll do the tefillin, you'll do after after Yom Tov, and you'll make up the tashlum for the time. Im kabel and the kabel. This is the mizakt, the briskerade in your nenu. But I want to take it one step further, Rabbi Say. There's a Mishnah Berurah.
Definitely a mitzvah to wear it. If not the Ramah, a person could make up, I'm not wearing tefillin today, I'll wear it longer tomorrow. Forget about Chol Hamoed. According to the Brisker
Ram doesn't say every day. The Ram doesn't say every day.
No, but a person could decide, I'm busy, I have a business meeting tomorrow, I could put on my tefillin longer. He meant that
No, maybe when there's a makom where
Isser.
there's a shaykh of a possible
Shaykh
isser.
Isser.
Yes, I agree with that.
Shlomo, yeah.
Yeah, because you're going up against the possible.
So Kvega, well, that is
you're
a
going up
mitzvah.
against the possible zoyer against.
Yeah. Kvega wasn't being goyrus. They all wore tefillin.
They all wore tefillin, so it's not a problem for him.
He's not gonna say
Yeah, very good. Okay, Yeshakayach, as always in the Har Nechutza. So Mishnah Berurah in Lamed has the following psak, and I'm going to raise this question with you because it's Negei L'Maisa. I don't know what the minig this shul is, but there's clearly a minig in Klal Yisrael, various different ways. The Mishnah Berurah brings the following psak. He says, Ein nachayin. It's not right. Ein nachayin. So basic ness is achas k'tzasa minichu tefillin u'k'tzasa yanichu lo yanichu mishum loises goydedu. This is a direct quote from the Artzis Chaim, the Malbim, and he says, interesting lashon. Mishnah Berurah doesn't say usher. Mishnah Berurah wanted to say usher, he says usher, but it doesn't say that. He says einen nachayin. So basic ness is achas k'tzasa yanichu tefillin k'tzasa lo yanichu. As I stated in Mishnah Berurah, the shaila is, the niyug in Klal Yisrael seems to be, I remember, I don't know, some years ago, I was came into a yeshiva on a Chalamayit trip. My children were still small, so it was a little while ago, and I wasn't exactly aware of this minig, and because I was davened in a place where there was no tefillin and Chalamayit, that's my minig of my family, and I came into the yeshiva, and they politely ushered me out. And they said, you can't daven here without tefillin, because the main minyan is davening with tefillin. You want to daven without tefillin, you have to go upstairs into the Snusha. If you go to Mr. Kuvaya today, till today, the main minyan daven is with tefillin. But now it's so big, and there are so many, this is the way it was in Rav Aaron's times, it's so big that they already have semi-official, or maybe even official, separate minyanim for tefillin and not tefillin. But they don't mix until Hallel, they don't mix together the two in one room.
Could it be over by not wearing?
Oh, 1 second. Why not?
A lot of times people could have.
So that's one that good. That's one heter in the Achrayim. That's one heter in the Achrayim by not wearing who says you're because they say you're Rav Gofnaki. Why aren't you wearing tefillin? You come in the shul. Why aren't you wearing tefillin? You don't have your parents' tefillin. You lost your tefillin.
It could be Sibus.
Could be you come Sibus. You're not to wear.
The other way is if you wear.
That's one of the truths of the Achrayim. Again, I'll give you 4 truths of the Achrayim. Give them a taratzis. So what's the right minig to do? So in yeshivas taka, many yeshivas are taka machmer about this. I'm sure there are many batei medrash who do pure one minig or the other with a machmer. In the last post-war, Kfar Nogra Moshe was very machmer in this. You couldn't go into MTJ, you wouldn't be able to daven with without tefillin in MTJ, and they would tell you that it's not right. And that Shuva Moshe is very machmer. He said where he says Leis is going to do with Nisa Deraisa, he specifically says, or read the Lashon of Moshe, he specifically says that tefillin and Chalamoid is this mamish and iser of afilu b'mehagim. That's the 4th machlokes, which we haven't gotten to yet. Sheikah b'zei isur k'tzas. V'kol shkein b'isurim gemurim k'vay tefillin b'chalamoid. Shahaloif shen tefillin over ba'asei k'she'enim meniach tefillin. If your minig is to put on tefillin, you're not putting on tefillin, then you're being over to say, you're being mevatel b'tzei of tefillin. And if you're not, you're being over Isser Zilzul B'mayit. That's what he means, that the shita of the Zayir was that you're being mizalz with the ice. That's Zilzul B'mayit. So you're caught in between two. Says Rav Moshe, Zicher, it's Usser. The minig lahakol, the minig.
Both ways, he sounds.
Both ways you have a problem.
Mix. Okay, but it doesn't to mix. It doesn't to mix.
So now good. So now the shaila is, are you allowed to mix or not? So the Mishnah Berurah says no. The problem is, I don't know about this shul, weiß nicht. I can't say.
The Rav doesn't with.
Does not.
No.
And the Mispalim, some do.
Some do.
And the Rav is not makbid to ask them to leave.
Most don't.
Well, so what's he saying, Khan? So the Rav is yeshal mi lismaich, even to go on. Because first of all, the Mishnah Berurah doesn't say aser. The Mishnah Berurah says v'nachayin lahachim.
Who's b'chlal loy v'lois to do? Is it an isser on the yochid, or is it an isser on the shul? Who's like? If I come in without tefillin, ben over aloysis guy to do.
As a chiv techachata. This guy who threw
is
me out held it was a chiv
No, is
techachata.
it a personal isser on a person? If I'm not putting it on my voice guard, or zolish veren agudis. I wonder what the isser is.
I hear.
L'chayra.
L'chayra. So that depends on the machlekes Rashi and the Rambam. This machlekes I have not said yet. Rashi says, "What's isser loises goyda? Shalei mechzesh kishtei tayros." The Rambam is a different lashon. The Rambam says, and maybe your shaila is negated to this machlekes. The Rambam says, lashon Rambam, shedavar zeh. We should shnei batei dinim he passes like a baya. It's the whole problem. Why passes the baya, which we can't get into now. That's passing like Rava. Shnei batei dinim bi'er achas is asur. Why? Shedavar zeh gairam l'machlekes gedoyla. I never understood what the word gedoyla means. Okay, unless I claim machlekes yeah good. Basically, shnei leis is going to do. So the Rambam holds that the Isser less is going to do is because it's Garil Machlaikis. This is not Al Yeshana Adam Machlaikis. That's clearly this is Rabbanan, as Ramesh says. And that would be the Gemara Pesachim. Al Yeshana from the Minig HaMokim that's there. Here is creating, having two minhagim being actively done at the same time. This is a Shaila from the Machlaikis Gedaila. Rashi says, Mechze Kishtei Tyrus. Maybe the Rav Chakira, Shaila is telling this. If it's a din of machlekes, sudden it's a chiyuv on who's in
charge of the machlekes.
Who's in charge of being machlekes? The shul's in charge, but the machlekes is every person has the yachid, not to be machlekes. Or you can say fakir. Yeah, I'm not sure. But let's get back to finishing this by saying. So first of all, what's the head to paskin shvig mishabura? So there's various minhagim in the achrayim, tzurtzim achrayim. The Marshag, Talmud of Ramshik. Says I daven in Marshik Shul. Marshik put it full. Other people didn't want to fill in because there already were a lot of Hasidim in that part of Hungary there. And no one said the Ramshik didn't say a word. He says, what the pshat? He says, we pass him like a bayesh, and he bought them gear achas. Some fill in, some people being noiheg this way and noiheg the other way is not shtei batim dir machas. Shtei batim machas needs two batim to make a psak. The Ramat Chabanet, who was a little earlier, takes it further. He says, the overlicense is going to do, you need a new question of first impression, that one Bezdin paskin this way, and somebody else decided to be noyeg another way. And these kind of issues, when you already had two established nihugim in Klal Yisrael, and some are noyeg this way, and some are noyeg that way, that's not what is going to do. That would apply, and that would be the basis of the heter for Tefillin Chalamayit. The B'sei Chamet brings another heter.
Because it's minig, or the Gemara says Saras Habas.
Oh, good. So it's a machlekes, big machlekes in the Rishonim, and there's a very long footnote from Unzer Chaver Rabbi Yafin at the bottom of the Ritz van Yuvamis, whether or not Lamaisa the Maskana of the Gemara is there a chiluk between Minhag and Yisura. This is a big machlekes. We don't have a clear psak.
This is minig.
That's the shaila. This is that's the shaila. Is this minig or it's not? So again, I'm going to tell you another story. When someone came in to ask the Brisker Rav what should you do about tefillin, and he said Zayin minig is azai. This Rav glared at him as he would do when somebody said something he didn't like, and he said das nicht minig, das machlekes hapaiskim. So now we're back to where we started. Did the Rav mean to say this is a violation of shtei bati dinim ger achas? That goes against the other paiskim who say you need a question of first impression. Here, a nihug, my family paskins vi desire, and your family paskins vi the rush. Is that a psak halacha? That could be. I'm not to do this and I'm not to do that. And the other terutzim in the Achrayim, which I don't have time to go into. One of the terutzim Stechemna brings is that if you don't make a bracha, since you don't want not to make a bracha, that alone takes it out of the license going to do. So there are haterim. But there's two questions I want to leave you with. First of all, and I found this in the talk in the bottom of the Magi and Ritva. A guy, Rabbi Nafna, Mach's brother, is a Chayil Levracha. He was a guy in Eilam. He was niktaf but meyama, and he has a shtickle tire there. He puts together all the mekayris and whether or not there's a din of iser of this is going to do a minhaga. And he says there's two types of minhaga, two dinim in minig. He says there's a minig where Klal Yisrael was makabel themselves to fear Zechan Isur, and there's a minig, I'll give you his lashon in a second, and there's a minig that Klal Yisrael was not mekabel on zechel iser, they will mekabel himself to be noyeg in such a niyuk. This is how he says the lumdus is. He was like, could be. It's clear to me that the Brisker Rav held that it was a minig le'esayr, because he held that going up against the Zayr was an Isura, and therefore that would be a minig, clear to me. But you could say a svara that the fact that people makabel themselves to not to put on tefillin, or to put on tefillin, whichever way you want to go, was a minig that we're noyig that way because there is a shita in the paiskim that way, and ichnem is a chaneminig. This is a dakastik shaila which we don't have time to go on now. Now we have a machlekes of paiskim, and some people do it this way and some people do it that way. It's rare because we don't have so many things in halacha. There's just chaptz chapteris minig ich min azay ich firzach azay means minig, or no? It's like the Brisker Rav told his 12-year-old son, go bring rice from the Gemara and tell me which one is right, because it's not a din of minig, it's a din of psak. The other question that arises here, so what will come out? Efshe yesh makayim lahakal. Now, it happened to me personally. When I saw this story happen to me personally, there's a bigger problem. First of all, what do some shuls do? Some shuls put up mechitzis, and they divide the shul internally into two. Okay. Fractic to Shaila, and somebody sent me a chipper printed, and I was mesupik whether I wanted to print it or not, because halacha is halacha. Mishabur state nachain shalai yasazais. You have to try at least nachain shalai yasazais. He said there's a bigger bismanenu, and Ramesh Sternbach already says. We was actually Ramesh Sternbach a few weeks ago, last month. But Ramesh Sternbach says bismanenu when you daven a shtilbach, there's no lice. Certainly no lice is going to do. Okay, but if you daven one shul that has a minig, could still be there's a lice is going to do. So the shaila he asked was, today, if you're going to start telling people that are going to come into a shul, they're going to put on tefillin, not put on tefillin, you start screaming at them, das allein is the gresta license going to do, and das allein the gresta machlaik is the feed the Rambam. The feed the Rashi of Shnei Tyrus, basically, because you can't have two Tyrus in the same shul. But if the whole diyun of the whole yisayt of the Rambam is that we don't want to make a machlaikas in Klal Yisrael, it's worse, first of all, midin of what you're telling effect that there's two kitais. By making two minarim in the same room, or with a divider, or even the way they do it in yeshivas, by sending me upstairs, up in Gemach, I was a little bit upset. I'm in my heart, I'm not telling you that that's enough reason to go against the Mishabura. But maybe he says this is worse, and according to the Rambam, certainly. So now we would have three reasons lahater: the four tshuvas, the Rashag, Banet, and the Steichemet, and the others will all say that Heinz it's not negea because it's not really a psak of what is going to do, even though it's a shayla of this is the rice according to Rav Moshe. The second possibility would be that maybe it's a type of a minig, which is not a minig le'eser, it's a minig that Klal Yisrael decided to agree that there's two kitais in Klal Yisrael, Ramela, this takano is going to do. And the third possibility is, and this I'm raising only as imtim salamer, because Sishver Rebbe Kneged Marin Prabeno Mishabura under any circumstances, that maybe Bismanenu post-war, when Kehillas aren't the same Kehillas what they used to be, because even this Chashav Shul has a Messiah of Limud Torah, but it doesn't have Messiah, pre-war Messiah in this Shul, and people are still in Maisa coming from all different places. So maybe Ramesh Sternbach Svara, maybe this is all shul today, unless it's I don't know, the Venus shul or something like that, or the Yekah shul, a KAJ or something like that, which has a clear Messiah. Since our shuls are composed of people who themselves have different Messiahs, Mela, that doesn't chapshanish in a din falais is going to do, and it would be worse to tell people yes or not. And according to Shittas Rambam, Efshavatas Alain Gern and Machlaikis, and this would be a possible limut chus of to paskin or to be naig nishvi Rabbeinu Amishubur. Rabbi Say Yashakayach, thank you all for listening.
Just want to fear us. We'll take 1 minute. This is the last week now till after Pesach. So I'll just say a short word to thank everybody who comes. It says that I saw brought in the Sefer Derech Sich, I repeated over here in the shul, that when Esav said at the end of Parshas told us, he said, I'm going to trap and kill Yaakov Avinu, Bimei Evel Avi. When Yaakov Avinu, when Yitzchak will die, that's when I'll take the opportunity and the chance to kill Yaakov Avinu. So all the Mefarshim asked was, what was Esav waiting for that opportunity? Some say he was waiting for when Yitzchak died. He didn't want to cause pain to Yitzchak by killing Yaakov. The Kleyaka says the reason was because he knew Yaakov was immune to being killed. Torah is Megino Matzla. We know by David HaMelech, the Malach HaMavis couldn't get him, didn't have a shlit on him because he was always learning till he made the tree fall. Yaakov Avinu had that same immunity. He was always learning Torah, like Pasuk Pumei Girsa. But then Esav knew the side. He was a big lamdan. An aval is asa b'talmud Torah. So if an aval is asa b'talmud Torah, he knew then he'll have his window of opportunity. Because an aval is asa b'talmud Torah, then Yaakov won't be learning. Esav will be able to kill him. So in the Sefer Derech Sicha, Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal asks, an aval learns Torah. He's allowed to learn Dvarim Arayim. If he learns Dvarim Arayim, so he should still have that same din. When Reb Chaim Kanievsky said Shiva for his wife or for his father, he was learning the whole time Dvarim Arayim. So he asked the question. Emphet Reb Chaim Kanievsky Zatzal, as quoted in the Sefer Derech Sicha, and he answered and he said, only a Torah of Chiyuv gives you Torah Megino Matzla. An aval is allowed to learn Torah, but an aval is not obligated to learn Torah. And only a Torah of obligation gives you Torah Megino Matzla. In the Sefer Beis Yisrael from the Gerer Rebbe, he asks the same question on the Klei Yakar, and he answers, only a Torah of Simcha gives you immunization. A Torah of non-Simcha doesn't give you immunization. These seem to be like two polar opposites. Chaim Kanievsky from Beis Midrash Shel the Chazon Ish and the Gra held Chiyuv. Chiyuv seems to be an opposite of Simcha. And the Beis Yisrael from the Chassidische Welt says Simcha. I think the answer is no, they're both the same. The größte Simcha is when metut was mis mechuyev. When a Yid does what he's mechuyev and he knows he's learning the Torah, a kaf aleim har kegigas, he's learning it because he can't live without it. That was Reb Chaim Kanievsky's Simcha. Every picture of Reb Chaim Kanievsky, the shine of Simcha is clear on his face. And he was learning and pushing himself to limits that are completely, we can't even imagine and fathom. That's because the Chiyuv gave him the Gvaldige Chiyus, and that gave the Torah Megino Matzla. Every person who comes, I thank Yedidi Shlomo Gottesman Shlita for coming. He came. It's very hard to come right after Motzei Shabbos, but every person who comes to learn, Mekun Fa'ag Yishmak, Mekun V'al Hanof and learn in Torah. We're coming because Mefashtein Mekenish Lebmon Torah. It could be Motzei Shabbos, it could be late, it could be any time. Real B'nai Torah understand as the Chiyuv is Geirim. On our level, Chaim Kanievsky writes in the Sefer Zikaron, one of the 28 things to do for Zikaron is to say Ahava Rabbah till liyachetcha biyahava with kavana. Quotes from the Elio Rabbah. V'davzayin liyachetcha, a little extra yichud for the Eibishter. That's what we have to do. So I thank everybody who comes here. The Eibishter should help all of us. We should have a Chag Kosher Sameach. The Eibishter should help us. Bona Chayim Mezayna. We should have Torah Megino Matzla. The Mitzvah Shem will regroup. Hopefully after Pesach, we'll try to speak to everybody if we'll do it together. So everybody should stay. I'll call Nifta Mechaver, Nifta Mitach Dvar Halocha, Chavraya, Kadisha, Shul B'Zeich, Mitzvah Shem Psuris, Taivas, Yeshua. Especially I want to thank Ephraim Levine for always being here. Tvidim Kesidra and Psuris, Taivas.